Thank you. We clearly have a great deal of interest in crime prevention and juvenile intervention in particular. I have some more questions. I'm going to try to put them together into a single opportunity for you to talk on this subject once more. It's a question about the role of juvenile probation officers and whether they are overworked and able to do a decent job. Many people on death row were abused as children. What about early childhood intervention, and what would be the most successful experience in helping a dysfunctional family to become better functioning that you can describe? So again, how can we better deal with situations that begin in childhood? What role can the courts and the justice system have for such families? And we'll begin with Ms. McCracken.
So let's see, that's a broad question. There's a lot there. So I'll just talk for a minute and a half about the way that I see the system. I think that every aspect of our system is overworked. I think that the juvenile justice system, really every aspect of our justice system is really at the point where you almost can't imagine that they can take another case. And part of that has a lot to do with the economy and lots of other factors. But that's why it's so important to focus on rehabilitation. And as those who have asked the question clearly recognize, we have to work early at avoiding criminal behavior. And we see now, we know this, that it starts very early in life with families. And so there's so many layers to get to make sure that when in our dependency unit, if a judge is assigned to the dependency unit, that you make sure parents get the right skills so they're not abusing kids when their children are 5 years old, because those kids end up in the juvenile system, and then those kids end up in the adult system. So it's breaking the cycle of abuse, breaking the cycle of violence, and trying to find appropriate ways to heal families and heal these children so they don't end up in the system later on, or so if they do end up in the system, we make the time they spend in there as short as we can. Thank you.
Mr. Cumors?
Well, it seems to me like the solution to these issues is really not in the courts per se. Certainly, certain departments of the court will play a very large role in this, the juvenile departments, the family law departments, and whatnot. I think that, I'm just going to return to my prior answer, really. This is there are agencies and groups within our community that will be able to do far more to deal with these problems than the judges that are sitting in the Superior Court. Nevertheless, the role of a judge as a leader and a motivator can assist the groups that are out there to do things about it much more than any effect that they're going to have while sitting on the bench. The other thing I think for us all to think about as voters and taxpayers is that all these services have to be paid for. So, well, if we're willing to pay for it, then we can probably get it. But if we're not willing to pay for it, we can't get it. So I think we all need to think about how to get more tax revenue in there so that we can pay for the services that we agree we need. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Zecher?
So juvenile probation officers are overworked because they are standing in the shoes of the parents, right? The parents are the ones really who should be ensuring that the children are doing what they're supposed to be doing, but the parents are somehow not available and the probation officer needs to step in. In family court, the epic of the dysfunctional family is probably what we deal with the most. I represent a lot of children in family court who come from dysfunctional families. These children are quite candid in terms of what the situation is at home. Their parents are fighting. Their parents are using drugs. Their parents are not at home. Their parents are allowing them to have free reign. Their parents are fighting so badly that the children are not being paid attention to. That's what I see in my world. And until we figure out how to deal with the dysfunction in these families, we are not going to solve the problem. Family court, and in particular family court judges, can help tremendously in that area. We are starting some pilot projects in family court that give significant and firm intervention into the family from the beginning. So when these types of cases come in, minors counsel will be appointed more frequently, early and often. and therapeutic intervention into the family to figure out why these parents cannot raise their children and why they're fighting all the time, such that the children are getting lost in the mix, to break that cycle of dysfunction. One thing we do know is that when children are abused, they do grow up to be abusers unless the cycle is broken.
Thank you. Mr. Pitzker.
This really is an unfair question because you're trying to ask us how we're going to solve society's problems, and I don't think any of us are really qualified to do that. But, and I don't disagree with anything anybody's said so far. The bottom line is it gets back to family values. You gotta prevent or help prevent the breakdown of the families. And the bottom line is the courts are not set up to keep people out of the system. We can help people to a certain degree once they've gotten into the system, but the judges are not social workers. Our job is to make sure the law is applied evenly and fairly to everybody that comes through the system, and we can try to help, but we're not there to solve the problem. We can't do that. It's not set up to do that. Thank you.
Ms. Alloggiamento.
I can tell you, I work very closely with the juvenile probation officers, and they are incredibly overworked. They've been cut, and I work really closely with the schools, and every school is saying that if we only had a probation officer who could be at the school site, which they used to do, things would be better. We know they would, and they just can't because they are in court writing papers. And so to answer that question, yes, they are overworked, and it's unfortunate. In terms of what programs to get to early childhood intervention, I know I've talked about it quite a bit, but I will say that, again, if we can address it with the families, that is our best ability to change behavior. The program that I started, the Parent Project, started as a program where I was looking for just people to voluntarily be in the program because there was such a need for it. But it was getting such great results that both family court judges and juvenile justice judges and truancy court judges are now referring into the program because we have seen those changes. And while I don't necessarily think it's the role of the judge, certainly not in court, to be a social worker, I do think that there has been a big push, and it's appropriate for judges to have familiarity with what the issues are in our community, and to the extent that judges can do outreach or recognize those issues and direct some changes, it's appropriate for us to use our position to do that, not as an activist, but someone who has the knowledge of the issues and the system. What I can tell you is we have faced cuts, enormous cuts in our city and our county, and prevention always gets cut, but we have to work on that for our youth.
Mr. Spielbauer.
I guess my thought is by the time they come into the parents come into the criminal justice system, it's awful late in the game, and the damage has been done. What can the court system do to remedy the situation with abused children? There is a system set up to come into potentially dependency court. But then we run into the question, if we have a lot of intervention which is intended to try to fix dysfunctional families, how much intervention is there, and how invasive of the society do we get that is going to invade family values and the operation of the home? I guess if I had to say, write a prescription, what is the best way to deal with this situation? Here I go betraying how old I am. I remember the days back in the 50s where religious organizations played a very substantial role in the communities that they were a part of before the state intervened. If there were issues, the religious organization would attempt to try to provide assistance and help. But as the broader prescription as to what the juvenile court, the criminal court system can do, or the justice system can do, I don't know that there's a lot. I certainly, in the days of when I did criminal defense, I saw the horror of abused children growing up to be adult defendants. And you see the acts that they did, it wasn't good, but you see the horror that they suffered as children, and that was troubling. And so I don't have a prescription or a resolution to that particular question. I don't know that there's an answer within the justice system.
Thank you.